wonder if I go large on the screen if I'm gonna do that. If I click back down, I do that. Okay, yeah, that'll work. I can just read off the thing. Okay, cool. I wish I could see who's all in the mix. What's going on? What's going on? It's gonna be like about a 13 second delay. What's going on, man? How y'all feeling? It's gonna be like a 12 or 13 second delay between me saying it and me seeing it on the comment on the comment thing or whatnot. So if I'm late answering your question or responding to your comment, what's going on, Mr. Stewart? Just bear with me. I think viewing it's gonna look live, like it's right on time, right on cue, right in sync. But so yeah, let's work. What's going on? How you doing? All right. Listen, is the music too loud? I don't want to. Hopefully the music isn't too loud for you, everything like that. But we're going to talk a little bit about what we talked about last night with the African history course at Hidden Valley. Went pretty well. I thought we covered some pretty good ground. This was Kemet Part 2. And then also we'll talk a little bit about, I'm not going to really go a whole, largely in depth when it comes to this particular shooting. I just want to point out one particular thing that I think has been a common theme throughout our culture. I just want to point that out. I'm not really going to get into the whole shooting aspect and all that. I really don't want to give any energy to that. But I do want to shout out Mama Evelyn. After class last night, Mama Evelyn came through. And she's an elder in our community, and she does a lot of work, a lot of support for us. And she brought me some books, man. I know I already posted them, but I wanted to share them real quick, man. This one right here, The West and the Rest of Us. I'm not sure if it's backwards. I'm not sure how it's working, but this book right here, this is gonna be a classic. I haven't read it yet, but I've like skimmed it a little bit, and it is on point. It is on point. So this is one of them. The other one she gave was this one right here, Decolonizing the African Mind. This is a good one, on point. I like this one. And the other one she came through with was Blueprint for Black Power. So, outstanding book, on point. So if you get a chance, now this book is, I don't know how many pages. Oh man, 800 something pages. Pretty thick, but Blueprint for Black Power. So I'm definitely gonna get into this. Don't mind these ads. I don't know what's going on with it. But everyone can hear me okay, right? Everyone's good? Everyone's feeling good? Let me make a little comment right here. And we're just gonna jump right into it, man. I don't want to waste your time or nothing like that. And just talk about what we got going on. Yeah, I know there's a little delay. Let's jump into it though. So yesterday we were talking about Kemet Part 2, and now when it comes to Kemet, right off the bat, it's 5,000 years worth minimum of history. 5,000 years. So there's no way in the world we can cover in 90 minutes. Even if we had 3 or 4 sessions, there's no way we can cover all that material. There's just no way. There's so much to Kemet. When I talk about Kemet, again, I'm talking about ancient Egypt. There's so much to it. There's no way we can cover it all. So we try to highlight different things, give an intro level, and then hopefully spark something that'll cause you to go on your own personal journey and start doing that study, start doing that work, doing the research and different things like that. So that's what we did. We kind of highlighted some stuff. The first thing we talked about was how Kemet is a matriarchal society, which means it's based on the woman being the foundation. It's the opposite. What's going on, Ronnie? Salute. What's going on, Shanetta? How you doing? So it's based on, there's the complete opposite of patriarchy, of course, where the male is the dominant figure within the society. When it comes to matriarchy, it's more of a balance. And with Kemet, women were the foundation of the family, simply meaning women gave birth to humanity. Women gives birth to the man. Every single person on this planet is fashioned and formed within the womb of a woman. And the people of Kemet recognized that. So they were so the woman was the foundation. And they recognized that. And another way you could explain it when it comes to matriarchy relative to Kemet is you couldn't be king unless you came from the queen mother. The queen mother is what gave you, or is what empowered you to have the authority as king or pharaoh or Nasu, what they called it. So the people of Kemet recognize that. Again, the woman being the stable piece, or the foundation rather. I won't say stable. They are stable. I'm saying foundation. And keep in mind, this is the oldest social and political organization in the world. Is matriarchy, meaning society based off the woman. So that's outstanding, and that's the complete opposite of what we have today. What we have today is the man being the monarch, and that's fashioned after Indo-European culture. Indo-Europeans are the ones who brought patriarchy into fruition. All African societies of antiquity, all of them, kingdoms, empires, tribes, clans, everything was all matriarchal. So Kemet was lasted for 5,000 years based on the woman being the foundation. I think that's huge. So like I said, you couldn't be pharaoh, you couldn't be Nasu, you couldn't be king unless you were born of the queen mother. She's the one who empowers you to have the authority, and it was a balance. Women have the power as far as empowerment, and the men have the authority. That's how the royal kingship worked. You can look at it like example I think we gave was relative to police officers. You know, me myself, I can't arrest you just on my own, just off GP. Yo, you're committing a crime, I'm going to arrest you. I have to be empowered and have the authority behind me with that badge. That's what that badge signifies. So what you could say is the man was the authority, but he was empowered by the woman. So the police officer was empowered by the state. The state could represent the woman if you want to use that example. And now, being that I'm empowered by the state, I have the badge. Now I can go out here and I can start arresting folks if they break the law because I have the authority. But my authority is always attached to the power that's been given to me. I've been empowered by that. So it's very important that we recognize how Kemet operated. They recognized the woman big time, and that's not how society works today. And we'll come back to this, as a matter of fact, in a little bit. I really want to touch on, there's a common theme when it comes to women, men and women, and men abusing women, but I'll get to that later. What else did we talk about? So from there, we just kind of talked about, you know, we're at Hidden Valley, so we're at, turn that down a little bit. Oh, snap, that's loud. There we go. But we're at Hidden Valley, so we're at Mayfield Memorial Baptist Church, so Christian background, and so we kind of wanted to tread lightly because the Bible paints a negative picture of Egypt, and I'm not trying to get into Christianity, right or wrong, nothing like that. I'm just simply saying it paints a negative picture. I know when I was heavily involved in church activity, the type of impression you got was that Egypt was negative. You know, it was opposite of God. You know, Moses is leading the people, and Pharaoh and the evil people of Egypt are trying to stop him. So what we wanted to do from an African standpoint, African historical standpoint, was look at Kemet in a different fashion, a different angle. When we came from the angle that they were sophisticated, they knew right from wrong, they had a system of values, they had Ubuntu in operation, which is I am because we are. You can't last 5,000 years and you're not on point relative to your relative to unity, value, morals, truth, justice, righteousness, and they categorize that in something called Ma'at, M-A-A-T. Matter of fact, I'll put it on the thing right there. Ma'at. That was their value system. That was your value system. So we went into Ma'at and what that stood for. Again, there's about 5 different words you can use to describe Ma'at: truth, justice, righteousness, balance, order, harmony. Those were the standards that they lived by. Remember last week we talked about the 7 liberal arts and then those 10 virtues that you had to master? Virtue was a part of the Ma'at system. And basically they believed in the afterlife, so that when you died, then you stood before the judge. They believed in that, in judgment and standing before God, represented by a Sar. And you stood in front of, well, what's going on, Omar? How you doing, man? Respect. So they stood before Asar, the judge, and you had to give an account of your life. And how you did that was you recited the 42 declarations of innocence. And when you did that, stuff like, I have not murdered, I have not lied, I've not done my brother and sister wrong, etc., etc. There's 42 of them. And you stood before Asar, the judge, And also you had a scale in front of you, and you had your heart or your soul on one side of the scale, and then you had an ostrich feather on the other. And so as you're reciting these things, declaring your innocence, if it was true, then your heart or soul would be lighter than a feather. But if it wasn't true and you were found guilty, it would be heavier than the feather and you'd be found guilty. And then a star got to dictate what happened to you next. And that was the judgment. So they had this type of system of values in operation. Of course, it would sound familiar, like the Ten Commandments, etc., etc. But my point here was, our point there was that Kemet had order. It dealt with truth. It dealt with righteousness. There was a value system. All of these things were in operation. And what they like to do, what European society likes to do, is to label our people as unruly, uncivilized. We didn't have any order. They had to come over here and establish that for us because we were all wild and going crazy. And we know that's not true. So, oh, you know what I forgot to do? I just realized I forgot to put this on, yo, is there a way I can change the privacy settings while I'm in this? Or am I already got to finish out and I got to change it later? Hey, I just realized that. Oh well, we'll do it later, man. But what else? Forgot where I was, and I messed up the feed. It's supposed to be not private, but everyone can see. But it's all good. So we established that when it comes to the principles and the values. After that, we started talking about how Kemet, because their accomplishments, they were so brilliant, they were so on point. How did they get to that point? Like what caused them to be what they were relative to intellect and things like that? So we examined that part. And what we came up, and this is the big point that I want to make here. If you didn't get, I was telling them last night, if you get anything, get this point right here when it comes to how the people of Kemet were so brilliant. And I'm going to turn this down a little bit so I really can get in the rhythm. So they had this thing called men fight theology. That's what they call it now, men fight theology. And it was a creation story on the Shabaka stone. Now the Shabaka stone, I think, is in one of these European museums. And that's why Dr. Rashidi and some of these other scholars say if you want to study Kemet or ancient Egypt, you got to go to Europe because they have all the stuff. Which speaks to a whole other relationship that we have with Europe, that superior stuff, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So the Shabaka stone had a creation story on it. Now this will all make sense at the end. Matter of fact, I'm just going to give you like the general. I'm not going to get us lost in the details. So the creation story is a mythical story. It's mythology. And mythology is a teaching tool. That's the context of mythology relative to Kemet. Now, the ancient Greeks would later on catch on to this mythology and form their own type of story and system, which wouldn't really match the intelligence and the degree that Kemet had. And that's not trying to be biased, that's just honest. They used it in a different way and took things literal, by the way. But people of Kemet understood mythology as a teaching tool in order to draw things out of you. That's true education, going in and pulling out what's already in you. So to do that, they had this creation story. So the first part of the creation story is three parts of it. Three parts. First, it's Ptah. Ptah. And when it comes to Kemet, one thing Europeans tried to spread because they didn't understand was that they thought people of Kemet worship multiple gods. That's really a big misconception. And I know some of y'all already know that. But a big misconception is Kemet worship multiple gods. That's not true. They worship one supreme God, and then they used something called netures. It was called a neture to represent a facet or attribute of God. And they would represent those netures using animals sometimes, different objects within nature, etc., etc. Like, for example, if you wanted to represent Ma'at, they represented Ma'at with a black woman. They represented Ma'at with an ostrich feather. You use different symbols to represent the attributes of God. So it wasn't you were worshiping multiple gods. It was just a neture, which represents a facet of God or an attribute. Everything manifests God. And so you study the world, you study yourself, study nature, you're studying God. Anyway, so part one, Ptah. Ptah is a neture, or God if you want, that represents thought, creative utterance, and creative power. Those three things. So in the part where, in this creation story, where it's chaos, there's chaos around, Ptah rises from the waters of noon. He rises from noon in the form of a hill. So Ptah is a hill. After Ptah, and I'll put Ptah first in the comments, and then I'll put the second one, Adam, the sun god. Atum, or Atom, however you want to say it, rises next and sits upon Ptah in the form of a hill. So those two things merge. So that's representative of the mind and creative power merging together. Ptah and Atum. Atum didn't have any powers, right? Atum was just mind. Ptah had thought, creative power, creative utterance. They merged together. Part 2 of the story. So I just want to move through it. I don't want to get lost in details. But part 2 of the story. Atum now, through himself, looking at himself, creates 8 more netchers or gods. He creates 4 of them, representing the air, the moisture, and 2 more. I'll give you the names. I'll put them in the comments here real quick, so you can get those. And that would be Shu, Tefnu. I'll put them in the comments right there, so you can see them. Geb, right there, and Newt. Right? Did I put it in there? Oh, my fault. Let me get it in there. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. So those 4 right there, Shu, Tefnu, Geb, Newt. Those are representative of air, moisture, the 4 major elements of the earth. Out of those 4 major elements, those 4 then created 4 more. And those 4 were Asar, Set, I put them in the comments, Set, and Nymphis, if I can spell Nymphis right. I might have spelled Nymphis wrong. So that's 8 total, plus Atum, and that's 9, and that was called the Ennead, or the Godhead. I'll put that in the comments also. Godhead equals the Ennead. This will all make sense in a minute, I promise. It all makes sense. Again, mythological story, creation story to make a point. And I'm using this story because this story helps to solve the key, or is the key that unlocks how Kemet became so wise and so intelligent, right? So Adam now has created these 9 or these 8 other gods, and now are in existence. Part 3 of the story. Part 3. So Ptah now, the part of the creation story, they're explaining that Ptah now is controlling the thought, or is those objects that he made up are made up of Ptah through thought, through spirit, through energy. Ptah is involved in all those things, and they say it's in Ptah that they live, move, and have their being. All living things that Atum has created. And so here's the magic principle. I'm not even sure if I explained that well, but we're going to rock anyway. Here's the magic principle. Because Ptah, who represents thought, creative utterance, and creative power, has merged with Atum, Atum now use that power to create in himself. That also represents this magic principle right here. That whatever you merge with, whatever deity or human element that you merge with, you take on those attributes and the characteristics. You take that on. So because Atum took on Ptah, he took on thought, creative power, and creative utterance, and used that to create. What they're trying to tell us is that we take on what we associate with. We take on what we have established relationship with. We take on those powers based on the story, and then we can use those to become, to create, to do things. And here's the kicker. Once you get that understanding that you can merge with another entity, nature as it is, you can merge that and take on their attributes, then they tell you this, relative to Ptah, there is no Ptah. Ptah doesn't exist. Ptah was just designed for you to understand that there are attributes within you that you need to pull out and use. Know thyself. There is no Ptah. In other words, Ptah is in you, if anything. You are Ptah. You have that power. That's what Kemet was trying to explain through that creation story, to that magic principle. Don't be put off by that word magic. I know some people think it's witchcraft or something like that. That's not what it is. Magic represents creation in the context of Kemet. So our African ancestors were trying to tell us that we have to look inside ourselves, know thyself, to know that God's attributes are alive in us. And they just simply use these different mythological stories and creation stories to help us recognize what's already there. I hope that made sense. how I explain that. It's better when I have the visuals and I have the the screen behind me, so I can kind of show you and I can break it all down. But that's just one of the things that we reviewed in the class, was the magic principle. And if you can get that, if you can understand that God's attributes are your essence, again, God's attributes are your essence, you can't be stopped. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And then you can merge with other, you can merge with other attributes too, such as confidence. You can merge with determination, perseverance, concentration, and focus. All these things are powers used to create in the natural. And if you merge with those, if you take who you are and you start to look inside yourself and pull those things out, and that's what true education is. True education pulls what's in you out. That's the whole point of education. Now, in today's time, that's not what it does. It doesn't pull out. It doesn't get you to recognize who you really are. You kind of go through life with this education system lost and not sure of who you are. And so, you know, but people in the Kemet, with that education system they had and those creation stories and mythology, that's how you're supposed to use it to help bring stuff out of you. That's true education. It's to bring out. And it lines up naturally like with the seed. If you have a seed planted into the ground, it breaks out of the seed and flows outward. And that's exactly what we're supposed to do. It's in us. We're supposed to break outward. Education helps you to pull that out. You have the right education, you'll pull it out. And I think personally, that's why they don't teach us our history, so we won't have that connection, that association, that merging with our ancestors and the attributes they used to achieve all the great things that they accomplished. Because if we merge from them and learn what they've done, it'll pull out. Everything will come out. All our greatness, all our ability, all our skill, all those things will start to come out as we study our history and get in line with what our ancestors have accomplished. We tap into what they tapped into to get it done. And I think that's why they don't want us to study some of this stuff. So that's just my opinion on that. Yeah, hey, listen, and I know I'm delayed a little bit, but if y'all got any questions or comments or anything like that, just put them on the bottom. I'll answer those as we go along. What else did we talk about relative to Kemet? We talked about, so what we're saying is, it's relationship and connection and association. Understanding that connection is what helped them to prosper and to have that high intellect. They just study relationship, study connection. Again, connecting with those attributes and qualities of God. Then our ancestors, talking about Kemet now, they understood relationship between the sun, the moon, the stars, the plants, human beings. There was a relationship there between space and the earth. And so they would look at three different topics: astronomy, astrology, and agriculture. They developed two things: how to measure time, and then two, a system of agriculture was based on those things right there. Time, they came up with a calendar. 3 calendars, actually. We'll talk about 2 real quick. One was the lunar calendar. Lunar calendar simply means based on the phases of the moon, that's how they track time. That's one calendar. That's pretty easy. It's about 29 days per month. 29 days between the phases of the moon. So you had 29 days. Now, they also had a solar calendar. And I'll put that in the comments too. Also had the solar calendar. Solar calendar is when they simply observed how long it took for the earth to go around the sun one time. Right? 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 48 seconds is how long it takes the earth to rotate around the sun. And that was your solar calendar. We still use that calendar to this day. It's been modified a little bit, but we still use it. They also divided that year, that 365, into 12 months. 12 months of 30 days. So 12 months, 30 days. In that month, the month was made up of 3 weeks. 3 weeks of 10 days. 3 weeks of 10 days. So 1 year was 36 weeks. Right? 36 weeks. 36 times 10 is your 360. That's why we say a circle is 360 degrees. Some of y'all already knew that. But that's why we say a circle is 360 degrees, because the original solar calendar created by your ancestors was based off of a month being 3 weeks of 10 days. 3 weeks, and each week was 10 days. So 36 times 10, 360. So that's where we get that from. And those extra 5 days were for festival. That's what they would call it. They would worship, not worship, but they would pay homage to different things, to different netures. And netures simply represent attributes of God. Remember, one God, not multiple gods. One God. Now the second part, they wanted proof. Proof of what? This is already, listen, this is already proven. I mean, this is now it's a question of who were the people of Kemet, which we went over last week. That's why we had to spend all that time proving that the people of Kemet were black, because all this stuff has already been found. Matter of fact, this next piece we're going to talk about the zodiac. In 1798, Napoleon and the French come over to Kemet, and they take the giant zodiac sign, the very first one in history, and even today it's in the museum. I think it's called the Louvre. Is that what it's called in France? The Louvre Museum. It's there right now. So let's talk about the zodiac real quick, how it's supposed to go. The zodiac was based on astronomy, astrology, and agriculture. The people of Kemet wanted to know the best time to plant their crops. So they noticed the relationship and the association between the stars and where the planet aligned. And they divided the sky into 36 different regions. And then overall, those 36, they divided those into another 12 regions. So 12 regions across the sky. That's how the people of Kemet divided it up. And of course, the Earth and the stars would line up in each one of those regions. Each one of those regions was represented by something called a deacon. And I'll put that in the comments too. Something called a deacon, right? And a deacon was a messenger to Horus, or Heru, most famously called Horus. So each region, 12 of them, had a zodiac sign and a messenger called a deacon. The deacon was the watchman or the messenger to Horus. And that's where we get the term horoscope from. And I'll put that in the comments too. There we go, horoscope. And a good resource for this information, I'll put the book down here too, is Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Anthony Browder. See if I can type it. To Civilization. There you go. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. So that's how they would know. And based on the alignment of the stars and the planet, based on the region it was in, the people of Kemet would know when to plant crops. Talking about agriculture. They also would combine that with the 3 different seasons based on the Nile River. And those 3 different seasons were inundation, when the river would flood. Then it was emergence, when those waters would recede back and you could now plant. Then there was the dry season, where you can now harvest those crops. So they took that, the Nile River seasons, combined with the zodiac, and that's how they knew how to master agriculture. Again, looking at the relationship between the earth, between the sun, between the stars, using the Nile River, all those things working together, and that's how they developed their science. That's where we get astronomy, that's where we get astrology, and of course they're the creators of agriculture. Specifically, women were the first to cultivate crops, and that was 12,000 years ago. So that's kind of how they navigated that. And again, all this is based on, so you have the name of the days of the week. The name of the days of the week is in that book, Shasta. Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. I don't know all 10 off the top of my head, but you can find that information in that book right there. So we talked about that. And we talked about how, again, relationship, connection, association, that line of thinking, that line of studying the world helped increase and build Kemetic scholarship. Remember, studying how if you merge with the deity, you take on their attributes. Remember, there's no deity for real in the natural, but they use that so you can, as a teaching tool. So if you merge with something, you take on that attribute. In other words, to look in yourself and pull it out. Then they look at the relationship between the world around them, and they develop that type of intelligence. So I think that's how they discovered zodiac and astronomy and astrology, and also mathematics. We talk about that. The oldest mathematical documents in the world came from Kemet, and there's about 5 of them. I think I can name some of them. It's the Amos papyrus, or they call the Rhine papyrus. They have the Moscow papyrus, which is not really called Moscow, but you know, when Europeans take something, they name it after themselves. So the Moscow papyrus, the Cahun papyrus, the Reisner papyrus, and there's like 2 more. My point is, there's all type of mathematical equations and problems that they have and they solve on this papyrus. And this is the first time you'll ever see division, multiplication, subtraction, algebra, trigonometry, calculating the volume of spheres and cylinders, calculating the radius and diameter, irrational numbers, all type of stuff. I can't remember everything, but so all those, the first evidence of that is these papyrus that you found in Kemet. And so they're the ones who, you could say, created mathematics. Even Aristotle admits that ancient Egypt is the cradle of mathematics. So, and I think they came to that understanding by observing what's surrounding and seeing relationship and seeing association. I bring all that up to say, here we go. I bring all that up to say, the European has developed a different type of thinking. He develops logic. Let's talk about logic real quick, because I think that's big. Logic and objectivity, being objective, is what the European teaches. So to be logic or to be objective is to separate yourself from whatever it is that you're studying. Separation, not connection or association like the people of Kemet did, but disconnection. Disassociate from yourself, isolate yourself, then go and study it as an object. And that's when you're being objective. You're trying to say that you have no connection to the particular thing that you're trying to study. That's a logic. That's being objective. And if you couldn't do that, you weren't considered of high intellect. This is Plato and them now. Plato and the Greeks established that. That goes directly against Kemetic scholarship, which says you need relationship and association. They believe that all things are interrelated, all things connect. There's cause and effect. So being objective, which to me, you can't be objective. You're always in some way, shape, or form connected to whatever it is. All things connect, right? Even when you start studying things, you still have a bias. You have a cultural bias. You're bringing your perspective into it as you study. And that's okay. But they say you can't arrive to truth. You can't have true knowledge unless you're objective. But objectivity is based on illusion, because there's no way that you're separate from something as you study it. There's no way you have an unbiased, uncultural bias towards something as you examine it. So right then and there, based on disconnecting yourself with it and being objective, making it an object, to me, that's a flawed type of thinking, and that's what has the world messed up now. Talking about being objective, simply because it's based on disconnection. So this line of thinking, if you want to be extreme, or you can see examples, extreme examples, you can see how disconnecting allows you to do some pretty heinous things to people because you don't feel that connection. And again, this goes against African philosophy, because Ubuntu was what we practice, and that means I am because we are, and I'll put that in here. So that goes against the I am because we are principle. You're not going to do certain things to people if you feel that connection, if you understand that connection. You're not going to operate a certain way. And I think being objective, where you disconnect and you isolate yourself, causes you not to feel empathy for people. It takes out the emotion out of things, and they think emotion is a bad thing. Emotions are negative in the European world. So even now, we're like, yo, you can't be emotional. You're being emotional, and that's a negative thing. We also include and associate women with being emotional. Women are emotional. That's what the European says. And emotions are bad. Emotions cloud judgment. Emotions override intelligence. So now they label the woman as not having intelligence or intellect. So she can't be fit. She's not fit to lead. She's not fit to be in positions to make decisions or choices. So the Greeks and Indo-European culture have always been against the woman. I just want to establish that. We've adopted that patriarchy, that misogyny that came from Indo-European culture. That's not African at all. At all. Just want to put that out there. There's some of the things, I think it's better when you do like a comparison between Indo-European culture and African culture. By doing that, we can get a good idea of what's what. And being objective and being logical, which is to disassociate yourself so that you can study something and then call your opinion based off that disassociation truth and knowledge, that's not the way to go. Our people, our ancestors, people of Kemet, studied the relationship between things. How do things connect? How do they interrelate? And when they did that, they unlocked certain wisdom, and they were able to build off of that. So we really drove that point home last night during the class, and I hope all that made sense to you. So that was that part. I'm trying to think if we had anything else. Yes, we talked, and from there, from our ancestors studying that connection, that's when they came up with the sciences, especially medical science. Medical science took off in Kemet. And Kemet is divided into 6 periods, by the way, and I'll put them on here. 6 periods, and I'll list them out. The 6 periods were the pre-dynastic period, the Old Kingdom period, the First Intermediate period. After that, it was the Middle Kingdom period, and then it was Second Intermediate period, and then New Kingdom. I guess I got to write all that down. I know that's a lot. Pre-dynastic. I'll put Old Kingdom on there. Some of y'all already know this stuff. You know, this is intro level stuff, but it's all good. I still love talking about it. I mean, I didn't know this stuff. Middle Kingdom. I'm just typing it real quick. Second Intermediate. And then New Kingdom. So those are the periods. Those are the 6 periods right there. Pre-dynastic, First Intermediate, Middle Kingdom, Second Intermediate, New Kingdom. And so right now we're talking about what was developed in the Old Kingdom era. Old Kingdom is where all these advances and the Memphite theology, I'm talking about the magic principle, the connection, understanding all the relationship, the zodiac, understanding Ma'at, all these things developed in the Old Kingdom period, and that's what kicked off Kemet to be as great as it was. That's the foundation. The Old Kingdom is when you have your pyramids. You have the step pyramid that came. You had I'll even give you an order of the first pyramids if I can remember correctly. You have the step pyramid. You have the pyramid at medium, excuse me, M-I-D-U-M. You have the bent pyramid. You have the red pyramid. Then you had the pyramids of Giza, the ones that are famous, the 3 pyramids of Giza. You see. I'm just going to put that on here. So that's how that went down. So all this happened during the Old Kingdom era. And I'm going to make a quick point about the 3 pyramids in Kemet, the ones that are world famous. One, I think it's about 1.4 million pieces of stone that they used. And some of these stones weighed up to 40 tons, even more than that, several tons that they weighed. So my question was, how did they even move those stones? How did they do it? How did they position them? What equipment, what technology was used to do that? It's fascinating. I mean, it's on point. This is why they try to say it's aliens that did it, because they don't want to give our people credit for that type of intellect, because they can't figure it out. Even to this day, scientists today can't figure out the cement type mixture that was used to form the stones that build the pyramids. They still can't figure out the ingredients and make it work, even to this day. It blows them away. Now, there's 2 things that pyramid represents. Talking about the Pyramid of Giza. 2 things it represents. Remember the story I gave you in the beginning about Ptah rising from the waters in the form of a hill. So the pyramid represents Ptah rising from the waters in the form of a hill. That's one interpretation. Another one is, and it kind of deals with math, two sections, which is pi, and I'll put it on here, pi and phi, or the golden ratio. And I'll put that on there, golden ratio. And the golden ratio is 1.618, and I'll talk about that in a second. So we're talking about the pyramids now, the pyramids. So the pyramids, if you take the sloping, first of all, if you take the height and you do the radius and diameter, you calculate that for the pyramid, you're going to get 3.14, which is pi. I'll put that on. The 3.14 is pi. You're going to get that when you start doing the math on the pyramid. Also, if you take the sloping height of the pyramid, which is 356 cubits, and you divide that 356 by half of the base, which is 220 cubits, you're going to get the irrational number 1.618, which is the golden ratio. And scientists say, mathematicians also say, anything built based off that ratio, 1.618, that golden ratio, is going to be attractive and pleasing to the eye. They say people with the most beautiful faces are based off that ratio, 1.618. And then another something that's built on the 1.618 is the rectangle. They say the rectangle is one of the most attractive pieces in the world, attractive shapes. And your cell phone is based off a rectangle right now that you're on. If you're on a cell phone, if you're on a laptop, there's a rectangle there. If you look around you, there's rectangles. Behind me, those doors are rectangles. Your television's a rectangle. So there's that golden ratio and everything. And some of y'all even know about the shell. When you study shells, that spiral And that's based off 1.6182. But my point is, the pyramid is the first evidence of these mathematical calculations. It's the pyramid. And your ancestors in Kemet designed all of these things. They came up with all these mathematical formulas. What I'm trying to say, if you apply the magic principle, as you study your ancestors and get in tune with what caused them to be great, you're going to discover that in you right now, you are a mathematician. All you need is the correct education to pull it out of you. That's all you need. That's all you need. You are an absolute mathematician and can master numbers just like your ancestors did. Like I said, all we need is the right education. That's it. Same way Imhotep, we talked about him last week. Same way Imhotep was an architect, a poet, a medical doctor, a dentist. He was the prime minister. He's all these different things, all these different abilities he contained. If we study Imhotep, we then understand we have those same abilities. We have that same potential within us. All we need is to merge with it, discover within ourselves, get the right education, pulls it right on out. And I think that's why they don't want us to know our history, because it's hard to get people who are in tune with who they really are to believe that they're inferior. Very difficult to do. So I think that's why we take the time to teach all this stuff or share information, because to me it changes the paradigm. It shifts the mentality, and when you know better, you just do better, and you start to step up in ways that you didn't step up before. You start to realize the ability that never was in you before. So that's one. Two is because there's a blueprint for success located in our history that changes everything. But what else are we talking about? And then listen, it's already me that keeps this connection. What keeps this connection? What's going on, Ryan? What is my signal not good? Is my signal messing up? And listen, I've been going kind of fast, trying to keep the video time down, and it's already like 41 minutes. Crazy. But Ryan, what were you saying about disconnection? I know there might be a delay in me saying it by the time I see your comment, and when you see it, you're already typing, but can't type fast. Yeah, it's all good. I'll start. Whenever you get a chance, we'll circle back to it. Let me see if we say anything else. Made some notes. Oh yeah. So another thing we talked about, and we highlighted all type of great things relative to Kemet. We went into some stuff. The architecture, the stability, how they lived. Let me touch on how they lived real quick, because they try to paint a picture that the farther back in history you go, the worse off you lived, and that's not true. Africans were living in 2-story houses. We're talking about in Kemet. In the Old Kingdom, it was 2-story houses. They had pools, a pool, swimming pool, gardens, and courtyards surrounding the houses. 2-story. They had 6 rooms in these 2-story houses. They had couches. They had bed frames made of leather or with leather webbing. They had furniture, and they carved the legs of the furniture to represent animal legs and animal paws and stuff like that. So they were living good back in the Old Kingdom. Then when you get to the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom, they had mansions and palaces. These mansions and palaces would have 50, 60, 70 rooms. That's how huge these houses were, these palaces and mansions were that our people lived in. We're talking about Kemet, so we're talking about the Old Kingdom started 5668 BC. So we're talking 7,000 years ago, and they were living like that. So that's big, because a lot of times people want to say, well, we were just kings and queens. But not everyone was a king, not everyone was a queen. So how did the regular people, so-called regular people, how did they live? Well, that's one way, that's a prime example of how they lived. They were on point. There was never a time in antiquity relative to African kingdoms where we lived poorly. Africa didn't start living poor until the European invasion came in the 1500s. That's important to know. They did not live. Now I gotta wait for the video to download. We talking about D-Mid, but did the video shut down? Y'all still with me? I think y'all still with me. But so how I was talking about standard of living. Their standard of living was high. Now compare their standard of living with all those palaces, mansions, and stuff like that. Oh, you've been late. I got you. Compare that with how we're living now in the United States as a nation. Across the nation, our neighborhoods don't replicate what we had in Kemet. That's number one. So how can we restore that? What's the blueprint to get that back? And we'll talk about that also. What else do we talk about? Now I'm going to get to the negative part. So we don't just talk about all the positive things. We also talk about the negative things. And those intermediate periods I was talking about, first intermediate and second intermediate period, what we're talking about there is there's an interruption in Kemet culture. There was political instability, and as a result of that instability, they were invaded by other groups. And so this is when you start to abandon the principle of Ubuntu. Ubuntu, remember, is I am because we are. You start to abandon the principles of Ma'at, truth, justice, order, and righteousness, because you're power hungry. So people got power hungry, and that's what caused the instability. And there's an Igbo proverb that we go over all the time. It's an Igbo proverb, and I'll write it right here. Igbo proverb. This is big. Some of y'all already know this. The Igbo proverb is, when two brothers fight to the death, a stranger inherits the land. Two brothers fight to the death, then a stranger inherits the land. So on the second time, Kemet goes through a major time of political instability. Here comes the Hyksos. I'll write that down. Here comes the Hyksos. I think I'm spelling it right. Hyksos. If I spell that wrong, you know what I'm talking about. But this group of Indo-Europeans who came by way of Asia capitalized on the two brothers fighting to the death. Remember, a stranger inherits the land. Well, these Hyksos, exactly, Tabitha, divide and conquer. What's going on, Tab? Divide and conquer. So they come in and they take over. Now, remember, they're not strong enough to take over until Kemet weakens itself with civil war. So another thing we need to remember and keep in mind relative to history, just saying it within history, is conflict resolution. If we don't have a plan for conflict resolution, we're going to end up like Kemet, have political instability, and then be taken over by another group. And that's exactly the type of narrative that happens when the Europeans come. They're not strong enough to beat any particular African kingdom one-on-one. So they sow seeds of discord among our people, and we start to battle each other, and they take advantage of that. And I'm talking about the Portuguese specifically, because the Portuguese are the main ones that start that trend, and that's what happens. So we discussed that also. We discussed we need a plan for conflict resolution so that these same things that history has shown us don't happen to us. And that's part of that Sankofa principle. When you go back in your past, get the wisdom, get the knowledge, learn from your mistakes, bring that to the present, and use that to build for the future. That's the Sankofa principle. So we talk about that. And that's pretty much, yeah, the playbook never changes, yeah. But when you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so this is why history isn't sexy. You know, saying you're going to teach or share African history, talk about African history, most people really aren't down for that. It's like, well, how can I use that for today? What they got to do with me now? That was way in the past. And that's where they get you. You don't know the history, you don't know the plans and the schemes and the tactics and the strategy, and they use it all against you, and then here we are. So that's that. That's pretty much what we talked about. I'm looking at the notes. That's pretty much what we talked about. I really summed up a lot, but that's pretty much. But the big, what's that? Yep, and that's what we meant by disconnection from the past. Exactly. Disconnection from the past also keeps us disconnected in the present. Excellent point. Good point, Ryan. I love it, man. Right on point. So that's, in summary, that's what we talked about at the class. We really spent time on that magic principle, though, where you merge with certain attributes, and then you use that to create. And I really want to encourage you to do that. You know, look inside you, see what's there, get confidence, merge with patience, perseverance, determination, focus. All these different things help you to just succeed. And that's key. Now, all that being said, excuse me, I noticed over the past few days, and I'm not trying to give this too much energy, just want to point out something. With the whole is it Stevie Stevens or Steve Stevens, whatever his name was, the situation that presented itself was that I didn't really watch the whole video, but something about, I think he has some problems in his relationship or something that he was saying, and then he goes out and gets out the car and he shoots a senior citizen, I can't remember his name, and stuff like that. So I'm not trying to give this too much energy. I just want to point something out, though, real quick relative to that. First, I want to say, family, not really to get caught up, and don't let these breaking news things control your energy. and get you off track and get you all caught up into some energy that you don't want to be caught up in. You know, remain stagnant, remain poised, wait for the facts to unravel themselves, or the whole scheme of things, to try to see where things are going before you react. I'm not even sure if I said that right, but flow with me anyway. But the one thing I want to point out is just the narrative of blaming women, men blaming women for their actions. And I'm not trying to be feminist or whatever the fancy word is, just being honest right now. But that whole theme of blaming women is traced all the way back to Indo-European culture. When I say Indo-European culture, I'm talking about how Europeans came from the Eurasian steppe. The Eurasian steppe, the area of Russia and that area there, you know, above, by the, what sea is that? I forgot. Look up Google Eurasian steppe, you know what I'm talking about. So 4000 BC, they leave that Eurasian steppe and they start invading all over the world. Robert Godwin, word, appreciate that, D-Mid, yeah, rest in peace. So they come from that Eurasian steppe. And they developed a culture based on living on that Eurasian steppe. And that culture brought three main things with it. Talking about the Indo-European culture, coming from the Eurasian steppe, invading the world, bringing these three things right here. War, racism, and misogyny. Those three things come from that particular area, come from that culture. And even in their mythology, in their stories, in their legends, they always have some type of story where tragedy comes on humanity because of something a woman has done. A woman did a particular thing, and because of what that woman has done, all the consequences come on humanity. Or if it's a man, he was operating in what they call feminine traits. And it's the feminine traits that cause the man to fall. Some of those feminine traits, and I'll read off a couple of them, what they believed in that society. They call, here's how they, so there's something called the Law of Manu. Let me write that down. The Law of Manu. I want you to look that up when you get a chance. Law of Manu is what was developed when they invaded Pakistan and India. When they invaded Pakistan and India, I'm talking about the Indus Valley, when they invaded that area, the Indo-Europeans or the Aryans, they established something called the Law of Manu. That Law of Manu dictates this relative to women. This is what it says. Untruthfulness, talking about lying, rashness, guile, stupidity, uncleanness, cruelty, and another one are women's 7 natural faults. So the natural fault of a woman is that she's a liar, she's rash, doesn't think it through, she has stupidity, she's unclean. Stuff like that is what they associated with the woman. These are her natural faults. And it gets even worse than that. Matter of fact, I'll even read some of them real quick. This is the Law of Manu again. The mind of a woman brooks not discipline, for her intellect has little weight. To kill women, one need not worry, for it is not a sin. This is the Law of Manu. So there was a real hatred for women. They blamed the women for the fall of humanity. They blamed the women for any problems the man had. Anything like that, they would always blame the woman for. And it created a real misogynistic type attitude. This is also where patriarchy was born. Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop also says, because of the terrain they were on in that Eurasian steppe, because of that terrain and how rough it was, physical strength was elevated to a high degree. It was you needed physical strength in order to till the land, to do what you needed to do. And they really had problems tilling the land, so they resorted into being nomadic. Nomadic means you got to roam around hunting and gathering to get food. There's only so much food to gather in that area. So when you couldn't find food and you don't know how to grow food from the ground, you have to take someone's food. So being nomadic causes you to be aggressive, causes you to have to do things you wouldn't normally do. And there's a lot of killing, a lot of war, a lot of imperialism going on in that area. So those things help to develop, they say, along with the myths and the legends, help to develop this misogynistic type attitude towards women, where they're constantly blaming the woman or their negative traits on being feminine. So all negativity is pushed on the woman. So I see that narrative at play in a lot of things that Indo-Europeans get involved in. You see a lot of blaming women when it comes to patriarchy and misogyny. Patriarchy, which births misogyny. And so when the dude says he blames I can't remember what her name was. I think it was Joy. I could be wrong. But he blames joy, and he's saying it's joy. And I think I read somewhere else where they were trying to say because he was raised by a single mother and stuff like that. But there's this whole theme about blaming women that I think we should be careful about. That doesn't come from, what's going on, Des? That doesn't come from from African perspective. That doesn't come from African culture where you blame women. That wasn't the case. So that's just my thought on it. Like I said, I'm not going to go all into the details of it, giving it any energy. Even when it came out, tragic situation, I wasn't going to feed into it. It is what it is. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just simply saying I wasn't going to let it dictate my energy like that. You know, but I did catch where they were talking about how he blamed the woman. And to me, that's a common narrative. It's a common theme. I don't know how y'all feel about that. Please put your comments. Let me know how you feel about that particular narrative, if you've even noticed it. But there's a lot of, you know, misogyny and patriarchy in our society. And I don't know if you recognize that, but these aren't African cultural traits. This is all Indo-European, just being honest, not trying to even disrespect anybody, but it's true. When you study Indo-European culture, when you study the history of ideas, where did the idea of the man being in charge of everything come from? Where did the idea of only the men can be the monarchs? Only they can be the leaders. Women don't have much value. Where did all that come from? It comes from the Indo-European culture while they were on that Eurasian step. Period. And then Indo-Europeans throughout the years have spread out, invading Pakistan and India, going that direction, coming down into what we today call the Middle East, and of course going into Europe. And when you see Indo-European language, you're going to see Indo-European culture. Again, that culture represents war, racism, and misogyny, patriarchy. Anytime you see that. So when you see Indo-European languages being spoke, you're going to know that's the culture. What are Indo-European languages? Here are some major Indo-European languages. Spanish, English, French, German, Swedish, Dutch, Portuguese. I can't remember the two languages in India, but two of them are Indo-European. All these and there's a whole bunch. You can Google it. Google Indo-European languages, and you'll see all the countries that speak this language. If you speak that language, you have that culture along with it. Again, what's the culture? What are the three things that culture brings? War, racism, misogyny, and patriarchy. That's what it brings. So I'm not going to go too much into it because we've already been chilling for 57 minutes. And I want to get these things down to like 25 minutes, man. But listen, that's pretty much all I got. I apologize. I didn't remember to make it a public video, but I'll definitely remember next time. Y'all got anything to add? Anybody, you know, any comments, any additions to what we're talking about? Listen, I appreciate y'all, man. Y'all don't even have to listen to all this, man. So I definitely appreciate it. Let me write that in there. Yeah. But that's pretty much all I got. I wish Peely was here, man. If Peely was here, he can drop some insight too, and Rick could drop some insight on it too. But yeah, that's all I got, man. I appreciate y'all. That was the recap. And listen, if you get a chance, if you live in Charlotte, you're in the Charlotte area, come through. We're at Hidden Valley on Mondays, 700 Sugar Creek Road at Mayfield Memorial Baptist Church. You get a chance, come through. 7 to 8:30 p.m. We start at 7 o'clock sharp. Chucktown, I'm eventually going to get down there. Chucktown, we're going to go down there and do like a seminar on a weekend. So if you're down, we can, you know, we'll set it up. I'll put the announcement out there. Come on through, and we'll do our thing, man. We'll just share the knowledge. You know, it's not anyone teaching anything. It's just sharing knowledge, man. Just sharing what we learned. And we'll go through. Yeah. Hey, appreciate everybody, man. Appreciate everybody. Practice Ubuntu. That's I am because we are. That's our unity. That's our foundation. And I'll catch y'all on the next one, man. Again, if you have any questions, just put them in the comment section, and I'll try to get to it when I can. All right? Peace.